we're here. Our final panel discussion of the evening. I was going to ask, are we still excited? But I can see that we are. Amazing, amazing. So, our final topic of the evening is data, tech, and the new age of consumer experiences. So, please join me in welcoming to our stage. They're already on the stage. To my left is not Jonathan, sorry. To my left is BBC Data Analyst Aran Culleton. Please give him a round of applause, please. Next to him, we have our very own Head of Platform at MG Empower, Mr. Jonathan Aina. Please give him a round of applause. And next to him, we have our very own Client Services Director at MG Empower, Natalie Grey. Please give her a round of applause. And next to her, we have Creative and Content Lead at Bayer, Venice Asourmatzian. Did I say it right? Yes. Give her a round of applause. Amazing, amazing, amazing. So how are we all doing? Good? Pumped to talk about data and tech? Okay, cool. So just for time, I'm going to dive straight into it. So first question, hope it lands as well as this community stuff we've been talking about. How can data help shape personalized consumer experiences in this day and age? Anyone can take the mic.
I'll start, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I think brands, essentially brands like the BBC are nothing without their communities. I think I'm in a unique position where the way we judge value is a bit different. It's not really just kind of profit motivated. Because we're a public service, value can change based on kind of the public that we represent. So that for us can often mean representing demographics that are underrepresented in society, or kind of just boosting boosting voices which otherwise wouldn't get spoken about. So I'm probably different to everyone else here, which again, I'm coming from a public perspective, but the way we derive data and the way we derive value can really differ based on the services you're offering, if that makes sense. I don't know if anyone else agrees or disagrees.
I think I can kind of put a spin on that, back to what it was mentioning. I think, again, it's also going to boil down to community. I think we're all in an age where data is no longer the buzzword. It's literally the currency, right? And the power of technology to harness that data and how much of it you can actually mine kind of depends how much of the currency you've got in your bag, pretty much.
Yeah.
But when you take that kind of on its own without actually looking at the connection or the intersection between the data that you have about the customer and actually about how the customer feel about you, because really and truly the customer is also gathering data about you. It's in their mind and it's forming knowledge and perception of you as a brand. So you need to make sure you have a very good understanding of that intersection, and that's where authenticity comes in, right? It has to be authentic in as much as data, right, would shape better consumer experience. It's actually about what data you gather, the quality, how you gathered the data, the authenticity of the data. And I think back to, I think it was Cecilia, and she was saying about how there are certain things that you know, and you don't necessarily need the data insight to inform that, and you can just kind of crack on with it. It's also because of the traditional approach that we data technologists, right, data experts that we've used to collect data. Take, for example, you use a pool. You've already narrowed down the conversation by using a pool. As opposed to the earlier insight from, say, Andrea about Reddit saying the best thing is to actually let the audience talk. And you basically try to listen. And also you understand your limit. There are certain things that you just can't do. Your brand doesn't cover that aspect. So being able to understand those things would help you ensure that the right data is being analyzed within the right context that you can then use to shape better consumer experience. In addition to that as well, I think looking at it from a long-term perspective, Camilla mentioned something about McKinsey, just even speaking about the data technology itself, about how, yes, initially, even AI, like everyone is talking about AI right now. Like I've literally been hearing AI since I knew anything technology, because, I work in tech. AI has been dated since like ages ago. But no one knew it because it wasn't matured yet. And it's the same way as well, where data actually has to go through that stages of maturity. So when you're thinking about your strategy, you need to actually not think about it as the experience is about what the user is going to click now. It's about the conversion for this campaign. But you actually need to look at it from a bigger perspective and a wider long-term plan to actually create an experience that actually keeps your consumers engaged for a much more long term. And again, goes back to that community, that co-creation, the sources of your data, and obviously, third-party cookie is going, but actually I think it's a good thing, because now you're actually going for the real data that is actually going to help you. Because third-party data, yes, is very fuzzy. It's an asymptotic solution to the problem. When you actually start gathering real quality first-party data, that's where the real juice is. So that's how data can help shape.
You know your stuff, innit?
Go on,
You came prepared. Well done.
Yeah, I definitely won't add any on data mining, and that's Jonathan's space, and I can't even pretend to sort of understand it. All I know is what comes out the other end, right, which is the amazing insight and segmentation that we're able to provide to our clients, but that brands are able to access now. And to the original question around personalization, I mean, it still blows my mind. I feel like sometimes when I read things, it's Black Mirror. KFC in China use audience facial recognition so that when you turn up to order, they will tell you what they think you're going to order, right? Terrifying, amazing. And brands like Stitch Fix are doing the same. They're able to put on the data and what they understand about you to provide personalized fashion recommendations. And so I think getting the data, mining the data, segmenting the data, I mean, if you use it in the right way, we've spoken about it a lot this evening, but truly listening and adapting content and really going granular on the different audiences you're speaking to, clearly, even down to the individual in some instances, that's the way we provide personalized experience and value. And I think that's the really exciting thing about data. And when we truly take the time to invest in it, it really allows us to connect audiences authentically, perhaps in ways they're not expecting. Perhaps it's still spooking people a little bit, but it's it's an exciting moment.
Speaking about AI and how to leverage like data-driven insights, at Bayer we have really invested into creative excellence and how to really quantify what it really means in order to drive more resonance with our communication. So we have partnered a lot with a partner called Creative X that really help us to analyze all the ads and the creatives that put out there on social media and try really to drive collective excellence through creative best practices by using tools of automation and AI and machine learning to really drive engagement and to really drive really good experiences with our audience and become more closer to them. But also touching upon what you just said, I feel that really needs to be sort of like balance between when our communication starts feeling that's a bit creepy, let's say, and sometimes that can happen. So I think that's the biggest challenge that the brands nowadays that they need to face. How we'll do that by really trying to maintain to be in the mind of our consumers and have a communication that feels like natural and authentic, and we talk to them, but we're not really listening to the conversations.
Yeah. You know what? I was going to get onto that because you mentioned, Natalie, how granular we can get with the data, but then doesn't that kind of raise concerns, So like, how can businesses or brands, balance that use of like personalized data and, with these concerns about privacy and security as well? Because to your point about creepy messages, everyone thinks Siri's listening, things like that. So how do we kind of balance that kind of use of data, but in a way where we're not sort of compromising people's privacy?
I think it's a tricky one, and even advertising standards and brands and the law can't even keep up with that, right? It's moving at such pace that it's almost impossible to set regulation, which is often what gives people confidence. But I think as brands and as an industry at large, I suppose, being transparent, talking about it, you know, making sure that when we are doing that creepy granular personalization, however we want to put it, that it's really adding value to the consumer. It's not seeming like it's adding value to the brand, like we've got a product for you, we've got a product for you. It's kind of understanding their psyche, understanding what they enjoy online, understanding what their motivations are, so that when we're gathering that data and using it, it feels like it's not transactional, it's two-way experience. But it's a tricky thing, and I guess on the other side, you know, brands, individuals are looking to share their creative IP, and I think the more brands do that, Grimes has allowed people to use her voice, however, and in whatever way that she, you know, whatever way they want, and she's always kind of at the cutting edge of, like, that kind of thing. But I think it's making sure that it's not one way, it's two way, and it feels like it's value add on both sides.
Yeah, I really like that you mentioned the word transactional, actually, because most people don't realize the vast majority of the free internet is transactional. We don't really question why things like Google don't run ads on the full page when they've been offered, you know, hundreds of millions for it. And then we don't question why Google's kind of like the biggest advertising company in the world, or often called kind of like, you know, the dark web and everything like that. So being more explicit in how we use people's data, kind of being very careful not to spam them with, you know, when you like register on a website, you just press accept. Making sure not to kind of overload people with information, and be very careful with the fact that they know their data is being collected, but not excessively. So we've all heard of like scandals getting exposed, like Cambridge Analytica, which happened a few years ago, where they were collecting kind of unnecessary amounts of data. And inevitably, when the data warehouse got hacked, that just got exposed. People might have just kind of, you know, scrolled through, pressed accept without even thinking, and they were essentially giving their information away. So it's one of the reasons why that data governance is one of the most in-demand jobs in the field right now. It's so important, if an organization can, to basically follow the laws are changing constantly, and make sure they're keeping up to date with people's privacy. Make sure, again, people are always aware that it is transactional, that you're not getting something for free. There's kind of, you know, no such thing as a free lunch. So making sure people don't have to go through pages and pages of things, and they just know once they're signed in, they're most likely being tracked, but not excessively, if that makes sense.
Definitely. And the other thing to add there is I think every generation has a different perception of what's happening, a different level of comfort with what's happening online, right? Like, my mum's surprised when something comes up on, she's like, I loved this pair of slippers on Facebook, I went and bought them. It's like, Mum, that's because it's like completely designed to do that. Like, oh my God, she's prime for the shopping channels in a few years. But I think, every generation is going to have different levels of acceptance, awareness, and expectation when it comes to their data. And again, I think it, depending on the brand, depending on the campaign, depending on the output, and what you're trying to achieve with your data acquisition, I think it's tailoring the kind of transparency and how you share that transparency.
100% agree with, you know, what they've mentioned. I'll just kind of like buttress it from kind of like a different perspective. From a developer's perspective, so you would typically like have two sets of developers. There might be more, but like 16 sets of developers or technologists. One who would look at data and go, wow, that's an advantage, right? They see that as a gold mine. And there are some who would look at it and be like, oh my God, that is dangerous. And we've seen that over the years. And actually, I do have friends who've turned out jobs or who have actually left the tech world because of these ethical reasons. I've got friends in AI and who are just like, you know what, I just don't agree with this whole thing. I don't think it's safe. And I'm just going to go out of it. There is obviously taking extreme measure, like, you know, completely just dropping, you know, the bat, which is not the right thing, because then someone else is going to pick you up and do it. But I think as brands, we have to think ethically about what type of data we collect. And to be honest, like Moore's law shows us that computational power is going to always increase up to a point. But that point is not, you know, it's not now, which means it's still going to increase more and more, which means the demand and the hunger for more data is going to increase. And yes, you might stop, you know, cookies, but there's going to be something else, and people are going to like just exploit that as much as possible, which is going back to the point of, if you really want the best for your brand, and that's the thing that brands don't know. A lot of brands cut corners by going after this type of data. If you really want what's best for your brand, it's about the data that the consumer actually gives you. That's the most important one, to be honest. Take myself, for example, right? Like, I have an electric car. To be honest, I don't care. I really don't. I'm being very honest. I actually don't care about it. If the electric car vehicle company actually collected data about me to model me as their ideal customer, I'm sorry, they've just failed. Like, because I don't care. But when I go to charge, I actually meet other electric vehicle drivers, and they try to like make conversations. And yes, I would have a conversation, but honest truth is, I actually don't care. So,
What car is it? I might care.
well, but the thing is, like, but if you actually think of organically collecting the data, I wouldn't be part of the people that will submit data to you. Yeah. You will be gathering data from the people who really care about what you're actually selling. And it goes back to the point of, if you're being ethical, actually it comes round to favor you. And that's where you're actually playing the long-term game. Yeah. But when you cut corners and you're thinking, oh my God, there's a lot of data, like I can do this fancy thing, when you come, you have your order, it's going to spook people out. And actually, you're going to end up losing a lot of customers. So in a way, you play the short-term game, but you might actually be losing on the long run, which is why a lot of brands spend a lot of money brand building when, it takes a lot more to kind of fix a bad customer experience than it is to actually, gain one, essentially. Yeah. So I think that's essentially important. But also, these days, it's become a really big kind of like business. There are companies that actually sell proper, ethical, anonymized data. Now, those companies could be properly regulated. Those data could be properly monitored. And I think that's what, government policies, and back to your point, data governance, experts need to really go after. And, and we still get value out of it, to be honest.
Yeah, I would say what, so like with all of that in mind, what, and going back to brands, what challenges would you say brands are facing now trying to implement these data-driven strategies based on kind of what you're saying about ethical practices and people misusing data as well, essentially?
Yeah, I think the first thing is availability of data. So every time as a data expert, if I get a question, literally like business question, I'll think, okay, what data do I need? A lot of time I make hypotheses like, okay, this might be the case, that the case. The first thing I want to do is I want to get my hands on as many data as I can. Because the more the data you have, the better you kind of like navigate it, and at some point you actually land in the truth region, pretty much. And then you have the insight and everyone is excited, which is good. But the problem is you kind of almost have to walk backwards. So a lot of the time, again, to your point, businesses and brands walk forward, which is, I want to achieve this, let's get the data to achieve it. Actually, what you need to do is work from the consumer's perspective. And when you start working from the consumer's perspective, you would actually be building the blocks that actually makes you ethical. Back to, for example, I don't know the name of the lady that asked us here, right? She collected that data ethically because she built a blog. And on the blog, people were discussing about this. And then she took that out to build something out, if that makes sense. So when you stop focusing so much on operational efficiency, cost cutting, maximizing revenue, maximizing budget, all these things, and you actually start thinking of adding value. What's the problem of my customers? How can I listen to them? And things like that, because they actually want to tell you. Customers want to tell you what is going to make their life better. But the thing is, back to the point that's been made earlier, are you listening just for listening's sake, or are you actually hearing them, or are you actually willing to go through the co-creation journey? So if you put all these things together, you'll be in a better place where you'll be more ethical, you'll be more conscious, and ultimately you'll be safe, and then you still win. It's not easy. It's a much more expensive path to take, but it's much more lasting. It's long lasting, essentially.
Thank you for sharing that. I have a question for you, Venice. In your industry, have you noticed any advancements in data and technology in regards to the strategies that you develop yourself?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the themes that we just touched upon about being ethical, about driving value, at Bayer, and specifically, we're always about trying to help people manage their health and help them and provide them more accurate information. We have seen through data, for example, with Caniston, with women's and men's health, that women feel embarrassed, they don't know when then they feel, and then they have some symptoms with their women's and men's health area. So we wanted to help them provide more accurate information, because the first port of call for them was to go into Google to search about what they experienced. But there, what they see, their information is not always accurate and reliable. So what the team at Caniston has done, they have built like a solution within our own website that is like acted like a symptom checker. So they go there, they answer some simple questions, and there they can self-diagnose, which is really important. We know with all the problems that we have in the NHS, which we need really to alleviate that. So I think by really thinking about looking into data, understanding how to come closer to the consumer, helping them navigate this difficult situation, we're really trying to add value.
Being someone who doesn't know your space, like how reliant is that data that allows you to self-diagnose? Is it data that's constantly being
of course. So we're using AI. It's backed by empirical studies, so it's really accurate, and it's all about in your hands. So you don't really need to go to a GP or to a doctor or to your pharmacist. I think it's something that is really about like some intimate conversation that you want to have. So it really helps you to do at your comfort room of your home, go into your computer, and then we just provide you a report. So you don't need to go and you buy any of our products. So you have this information at your hands, and you can do whatever you want with it.
And have you seen like sort of increase in like, not say consumers, but increase in like patient engagement and kind of feedback on
definitely.
what needs to improve, or
within the symptom checker?
Yeah.
I think more and more people are using it, and the more they use it, the more data analyze, the more the AI learns more. So we're always trying to make the experience better for them. But it's also trying to think about various ways we can think to help our consumers. For example, menopause is a really big thing that we're working at the moment. We have seen there is a really big gap in how women are really tackling all these issues that they're experiencing. So we're always at the forefront trying to come up with solutions in that area as well.
Amazing. A question, I guess, for kind of all the panel, like with kind of trends in terms of like extracting data and stuff, like you said, self-diagnose. Do you see any sort of trends in data or technology that kind of will further shape this new age of the consumer experience? Have you guys thought about any of that, or you currently, if you can share, currently sort of testing anything like that out?
Well, I don't know how much I can speak for like the entire data industry.
Yeah.
But often, like capturing people's attention, the more we kind of like spoon-fed information, it's blasted from kind of every corner. Capturing the information becomes more difficult and a lot more competitive.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of companies, it's very tempting to go the way that Jonathan mentioned earlier and just collect as much data as possible and run the risk of kind of overcompensating, kind of risking privacy over security, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But again, it's a very competitive landscape. So there's a fine balance between extracting as much value from the data as possible while maintaining privacy and competing with other people, other organizations, make sure that it's a level playing field. Again, I think actually an underrated problem in the industry is data literacy.
Okay.
Is a common misconception that like only analysts or like programmers need to be aware of data, because usually from when it gets collected to when it's used, there's a huge pipeline. Loads of people look at that, business analysts, even like way down the line, marketers eventually. So making sure like everyone along the line is aware of what data is being collected and used, but still collecting as much that's necessary to maintain relevant in the space, if that makes sense. There is quite a balance.
Our CEO is smiling right now with that comment about everybody using data. But yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense to me. Jonathan, did you want to go?
Sure. Data technology. I like our proprietary one better. So a good example, I think we all know generative AI and what's actually doing right now.
Yeah.
Massively transformed the space, to be honest. I was excited when it came out, so that's good. Because again, back to actually listening to your, users, actually, that was one of the most important things for generative AI.
Yeah.
Because it's
sure.
more about how can we make computers understand humans better? How do we bridge that gap? And again, you can see how it's massively transformed everything. So if you actually focus on the right problem from the right perspective, you would be breaking through. Things will break, but you will be breaking through. That's essentially what you're going to get to. What we've done at MJ Empower is we've created an in-house proprietary solution for our social listening platform that leverages generative AI. We actually had the case study of recent with like a sports, club. And essentially what we do is we leverage the mass amount of contents that we've, gathered ethically about a particular brand. It could be a person, an influencer, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Now, having humans analyze that would take ages. But what we've done is we've leveraged generative AIs to contextualize that enormous amount of data, mine it extensively to extract out the key themes that are actually driving engagement with the audience. So essentially, we could analyze your brand and tell you what are the real key things that are driving engagement, maybe for a particular campaign. We could narrow it down within a subset of a campaign. We could narrow it down within a subset of a period. We could narrow it down within a particular co-creation strategy that you're trying to do. But we would actually help you understand what is really driving engagement. And that way, we can also reverse engineer that to generate suggestive content that would land well with your audience. And that way you can, go on. We have a massive in-house team in terms of like, that helps with kind of like, execution. So they can assist with the execution. We have a studio team fully equipped that can actually, shoot the content and, bring it to life as well. So essentially we can help you mine end to end and actually drive results, using generative, AI. So that's a technology that I would say, definitely can help
shape the future.
Shape the future.
Are you seeing
Just to touch on the trends piece as well, and it kind of comes back to where we began this evening around community. And I think, there's lots of kind of facilitators of community, but one that I've really seen kind of emerging online recently is communities come together and use the power of AI to add value as a community. And there's a really great example, Startup-y, where I think it's about 300 really intelligent people in different walks of life have come together. They've shared their knowledge and they have plugged in an AI integration which allows you to ask questions, but what is surfaced comes from their brains. So it's kind of this amazing intersection of human intelligence with data and data mining, I suppose, like picking out the bits that the person who's searching is really looking for, but from a place of human intelligence, which I think is always important when we're talking about data, is to think about the human integration in it as well. So I feel like there'll be more and more of that, and more people using kind of tech and innovation, but to still share the same message, but at scale and in a more personalized and back to the value point, more valuable way.
That makes sense. I was just going to quickly go back to what you were saying, Jonathan, on generative AI and how you see it shaping sort of the future of data and tech. Are you seeing obviously you work in-house, but are you seeing like brands like you as well, Aaron, are you seeing like brands take up, that kind of approach, or is it something that's kind of new on the scene, you would say?
I'd say the stats that were shared earlier said about 34% of brands assume that that's going to shape the future.
Yeah.
Does
Does that feel real? And like, does that stat feel real?
I would say that's the lucky 34%.
Is that data ethical?
Yeah, it's a survey, so it is ethical. So they actually submitted it.
Yeah.
That would be the lucky 34, right?
Okay,
because
yeah.
definitely AI, these type of solutions will definitely shape the future. I think, not to scare anyone, I always like to a little bit, but most of the things you've actually seen in these futuristic movies would at some point come to pass, honestly.
What movies are we talking about?
We're talking about robots actually acting like humans, cars flying,
iRobot,
all these things. They will actually happen, right? It would take some time. It would take a long time.
Yeah.
But we have the building blocks. And there's a logical approach. There's a computational approach. It makes sense. It could happen and it will happen. What domain and how are they applied would be the determining factor. Certain things would not be exactly as you've actually seen them. Yeah. But yes, they will actually happen. AI, generative AI, chatbots essentially is built off of generative AI, right? So it's essentially like under the same umbrella. So all these solutions will keep evolving, and they would actually become quite integral to what a lot of companies do. Now, in what form would it be leveraged? It would depend on the industry. It would depend on the company.
Yeah.
It would depend on the department even. Certain departments might take it up quicker than the others. It would depend on a lot of factors. But overall, it would be the way to go, essentially.
Yeah, just to build on that, I think the way the public perceives a breakthrough in AI or generative AI is different to how it actually is. For example, the paper that allowed ChatGPT to actually become a thing and make it as efficient as it is was actually released about, correct me if I'm wrong, I think 5 years ago. Google released a paper. So it was a breakthrough, but it's not like it happened instantly. It didn't just get released in 2022.
Yeah.
So a lot of the figures, when people say they're worried about their job getting taken over, it's a lot slower than people actually do realize. I mean, eventually, I think we are going to get like some Terminator scenario in a few years, but it really is slow developments. So you might hear like news articles kind of hyping it up, but I think for the most part, it's quite inflated.
Okay.
Sorry, just to add to that as well, like about 40 years ago, sort of, if you walked into a computer room, so where you would normally write your computer programs, your hard disk, your storage devices, a 5 gigabyte, I don't know if everyone knows what that is, but that's like maybe 5 high quality movies, that's it maximum, is the size of a refrigerator. Is that massive? That was like 40 years ago. And the job spec of whoever is handling that storage device would involve you have to be like very muscular, right? You need to be able to like move it around and do a lot of things.
So 5 gig was heavy to move.
Yeah, it's really massive. It's like a refrigerator, quite massive. So imagine how that person would have felt when they said, oh, it's not longer going to be the size of a refrigerator. Actually, it's going to be like a simple carryable device. It's going to be like, oh my God, my job is gone. But no, your job is not gone. It's just going to be transformed into something else. It's going to be made more efficient. So you would still manage hardware devices. Yeah. It's going to be different type of hardware devices with, different skill sets, but still leveraging on the existing knowledge. But things are going to be done quicker and more efficient. Yeah. And actually overall, right now, you have like even much more IT roles than they were back then. Yeah, so actually there's going to be more job opportunities and there's going to be a lot more interaction between AI and human. Talk about the solution that we built. Even after the AI spit out the results, I still needed the strategies to make sense of it and apply it to the customer's domain. Because otherwise it's just going to be blob of data without any impact. So at the end of the day, it's just roles are going to evolve. Yeah. And instead of one person managing, let's say, 3 accounts, you're going to be supercharged by the power of AI, because what you would do in, hours, you'd be doing in seconds. And also back to the point of, there's a spiral, it's a circle, right? end users want it now.
Yeah.
End users will always keep wanting it now and faster, simply because the technology is also developing really fast as well. So within their own space, they are working in areas where things need to be done quicker. So it kind of creates this chain of, this cycle of, high demand and high velocity. So we actually need AI to keep up with that velocity. Because if we don't move, people are going to be asking us to do much more, and our capacity is not going to be able to carry it. So actually, instead of getting really scared about AI, actually, and all these technologies, you need to embrace them.
Yeah.
Because that's actually what's going to help you fulfill the needs of the customers or the businesses on the long run.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, embracing AI, I'm going to have to stop there, unfortunately, but it was a very, very interesting conversation, and thank you all for kind of bringing your perspectives and your expertise knowledges to the floor today. Ladies and gentlemen, was that good? Amazing. So, we've actually come to the end. I want to say, thank you. I mean, my job is over for today. But I just want to say a big thank you for everyone coming out tonight and sitting with us through 3 panels. Very insightful. We had a big mic drop with the question in the beginning, and I really feel like it set the tone for some good, insightful conversations. I've learned a lot about data in the last half an hour that I didn't know. So thank you again to our panelists, and thank you again for coming. Just a few bits from me. So as I mentioned, our white paper is out. And if you'd love to know more about some of the stuff we've been talking about today, sort of data, storytelling, and co-creation, we have our VR experience that you can interact with. But as for now, we have a lovely Pheno Taste who have prepared lovely food and drink for us upstairs to enjoy. And we have a DJ booth as well and a photo booth as well. So please don't go anywhere. Head straight up and enjoy. But thank you once again, and we'll see you next year.